You barely mention the Prohibition Amendment in the book, which was striking to me. But because if you were worried about amendments and that path, the Article 5 path, prohibition be a really big problem for you? Because this is an amendment that really is not about the constitutive political entity as such. It's social policy. And of course, it was an absolute catastrophe in terms of undermining the legitimacy of the rule of law, in terms of throwing the country into a complete mess. Did that experience also help kill the the amendment process as effectively as anybody else?
You know, there really is tremendous scholarship on prohibition and the repeal of prohibition. My colleague, Lisa McGurr, has a fantastic book about it. It's just such a rich social and economic and political and cultural history.
It is fascinating.
So I like it. It's truly interesting. I didn't you're absolutely right. I don't pay it a lot of either to prohibition or the repeal, but I don't pay a lot of attention really to any of the original 10 amendments either, or the Bill of Rights. It's really not a history of the amendments that were ratified. So I agree it's really important and interesting. To the degree that I do talk about it, I'm really fascinated by, and I don't think historians have really reckoned with the influence of this guy, James Montgomery Beck, who was known as Mr. Constitution in his day. He was really opposed to constitutional change as he saw it in any form. He believed in judicial supremacy, but he happened to live in an era of really the most conservative court the country's ever had. So it was perfectly fine for him for constitutional change to come by way of the courts. But he was really opposed to the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, to the 17th Amendment prohibition, to the direct election of the direct election of the Senate. He was opposed to prohibition. He was opposed to women's suffrage. So he hated all those 4 progressive era amendments. The only amendment he ever really liked was the repeal of prohibition. And it's kind of interesting to watch that journey because by the early 30s, Beck, who has been enormously influential, he writes this really important, the kind of most widely read book about the Constitution in the first half of the 20th century in terms of popular readership. He, believes the Constitution was perfect originally. It has never really needed amended. Any tinkering that needs to be done can be done by the 9 old men. But he's really opposed to prohibition, and he's also so opposed to the New Deal that by the 1930s he becomes he proposes there being not a constitutional convention, but like a meeting of 200 of the most eminent men to propose amendments to the Constitution. Because I think he just is people who are opposed to amendment and prefer the court to make changes, they just don't tend to really last the test of their principles when the nature of the court changes. And Beck is a good example of that.
But you also have Woodrow Wilson at the other end of the extreme, who basically becomes president saying, I don't really believe in this Constitution at all.
Well, he's been a professor of constitutional law.
I know, and he hated it.
He does believe in it. He's also not keen to amend it. He doesn't support the women's suffrage amended for years and years and years until it threatens his lack of support threatens his re-election.
Let's get to the nub of this, which also gets to the question of original intent, which you also deal with, which is that if the Constitution is, there has to be some middle ground between the Constitution being completely malleable and the Constitution being completely unchangeable, right? So how do we measure that? Do we ascribe to the founders of this country and to the political philosophy they adhered to and the ideas they believed in something in some ways eternal, something that represents a particular distillation of a particular form of Anglo-American liberalism that actually is the core of our country, and you don't want to mess with it because they were geniuses. This has worked. And in fact, if we want to change it, we should ask ourselves, what were they trying to do? What were the ideas that informed them? That if you, to use William F. Buckley's analogy that you cite, is that if you have a will that's left by someone, you ask, what did the person who wrote this will intend? If there's ambiguity or some imprecision. It seems to me, let me put it this way, if you abandon any concept of that, you're kind of at sea.
That is not what they believed. I think that many people believe that in good faith now. That is a mode of interpreting and understanding and, in fact, worshiping the Constitution that has a wide purchase. And I think
worship's a little excessive, but
one
respect.
That is a sense of fidelity, I think would characterize what you've described.
Yeah.
I think that's widespread, and I think it's earnestly felt. It is not original to the Constitution. It's not what the framers thought or how they thought about constitutionalism.
They did not think that natural rights exist and cannot be violated?
They thought that constitutions are fallible.